Hello my friend and welcome to my channel Faisal Azib. I hope that you're well. Let's keep building our cat game, and in this video we're gonna be concerned by switching from one active player to another one. So as we already know, whenever the player rules are 1, we will enter this else block, right? So when the dice is not 1, then the current dice gets added to the current score, but if we happen to roll number 1, then we lose all our score, and it is the next player round, right? So, in the previous video, we implemented this functionality of adding the dice to the current score, only as the player number 0, okay? But now, we need to make this work for both player number 0 and number 1. Also, for that, we need to keep track of which player is actually the current player. And in order to do that, we actually need to keep track of which player is actually the active player in the moment that the dice was rolled. So basically, we need to know which player is right now playing. And with right now, I mean, whenever the button is clicked, okay? So we will create another variable which will hold exactly that. So it will hold 0 if the current player is player 0, and it will hold 1 if the active player is player number 1. So let's do that. Put it here. I call it active player, and we start. Of course, with the first player it is 0. Good. Because remember that the player number 1 is player 0 and player 2 is here in our code player number 1. And in fact, let me explain you right away why that is it. So the reason is that we will store the scores of both players in an array. So let me do that here. So what I will call it, const scores, okay, and it is equal to an array, empty array, because it is an array, so we use const, not let, okay. So this array will start with 2 points, or with two numbers, 0 and 0, okay, for both players. And so these scores are actually the final score. So the big score, which accumulate, let me show you that in the demo to understand. Okay, here is demo. So let's start. Roll the dice, hold, and roll the dice. Oh, sorry, 1, no problem, hold, hold, no problem, roll the dice, and 8, hold, good. So that's the big score here. So these are the current score. Okay, here 0, 0, because I hold them. And these are, let's say, the total score that keep accumulating, right? And so we are storing these two scores here in an array, 11 and 8, for example, in this case. And remember that the array is 0 based, and so the score of player number 1 will be here at position 0, and the score of player 2 will be at position 1. And so that's why it will be handy to have the active player variable here also set to 0 and 1. Okay? And we will see that in action actually in the next video, inshallah, where we will hold the scores. But for now, knowing which is the active player is going to be important to actually display the current score here. For the current player, and not just always for player number 0. So, instead of manipulating the element of player 0, I come back to JavaScript. So the current score of player 0, let's actually select the element dynamically. Okay? So let me show that to you. So here, what we will do, we actually now do the selection right here. So what we'll write, document dot get element by ID, element by ID. Okay, and then here we need the class name. So the class name is going to be either current 0 of player 0 or current 1 for player 1. ID name, sorry. And so maybe now you start to see once more why we use the active player as 0 or 1, because now we can use that variable to basically build this collapse names. Okay? So, when it is player 0, we then end up with current dash dash 0. And if it is 1, we'll end up with current dash dash 1. Because that's going to be the active player. So, what I just said is to do this. So, here I will write current, okay, dash dash, and then here what I will do, I will use the active player, okay. So here I will write variable active player, okay, and of course it is start with normal case. It is with this one. Oops, where is it? Good. There. And I write it here. Good. And so now on this we will get the text content and set it now to current score. Okay. So again, this one here, we always set the text content on player number 0. But here we do instead select the score element dynamically, based on which is the active player right now. Okay, so let's remove this line now, we don't need it. Good. So this is very handy trick of building the ID name like this dynamically. Now here, when we switch the player, we then need to change that value from 0 to 1, or from 1 to 0. So let's do that here. So essentially switching the next player, that means to change that value. Okay, so active player, okay, equal, and now here, let's now use again the ternary operator. So we can say if the active player is equal to 0, then we want the new active player to be 1, okay, like this. And else it should be 0. Simple. Alright? Does that make sense for you? I hope. So essentially, we are assigning the active player here, and you are checking whether right now it is player 0. Okay? So, if it is, then here the result of this whole operator, so which again is all of this, then the result will be 1. And so, then active player will be equal to 1, but if this is else here, so if the player is actually 1, well, the active player will become 0. And so, essentially, this allows us to switch from 0 to 1. Good. So I think this would actually work already. So this is, we have seen in the demo. And let's do that now. Check this in the real game. Here it is demo, so it is a real game. Okay. So let's hide it. Now let's just make sure if it works. I have reload. Yeah, good. So I will roll. Good. So I can roll until getting 1 to see if I switch to number 2. Then 6, 4, 5, 3. Good. Okay. Now I am getting 1. So normally now I have switched it in number 2. Okay. Now if I click to roll dice, as you can see, but there is no problem number, but I am in the player 2. as you can see. But don't worry about the number here, the current score. Huh? It is another thing. Okay? So it works, okay? But the current score was just for this player. But now we did that for the current score of the previous round. So as we switch the player, we also need to reset the current score. Okay? So the logic of the active player is already working. But we still need to reset the current score, of course. Also, you see that visually nothing changed yet. Okay? It is, we have this right here and not here. So in the real game, when the player is switched, this side here normally become white, okay? And so the background kind of changed there, okay? And another thing is that this current score here should also then be set back to 0 again. So basically, the previous player should have its current score here visibly set to 0. So let's just me tell you what happens here. Let's see in demo. I will the door. Okay, I am directly in number 2. Good. Roll, as you can see. So here, look very well. When I check when I am in 0, look very well. When I roll the number 1, not yet. Do you see? Here I have 0, and I switch to player 1, and here I have the current score. Start from here. Okay? So, now, I'm going back to JavaScript code. Now, the first thing that we need to do is to set the current score back to 0. Okay, after this. So, current score equal 0. And we need to set the extent back to 0. Okay? So, basically, of the active player before we switch it. So for example, player 0 was playing and then we switch to player 1. But before we do that switch, we need to change the current score of player 0 back to 0. Okay? So we need to do that here before we do switch. It's very important. So basically, what we do is the same as this. Same thing. Okay? But we simply set it to 0, but before to switch. It's very important, so I mean here. Here we set to 0. Before to switch. Here, what does it mean? So, we are selecting the current player, which at this point is still 0, and then we set his text content to 0, and then we switch from 0 to 1. Okay? So now let's try our game, if it works. I am in demo, so I reload. Okay, so let's roll. Here I am 3, 9, good. Until I am waiting to get 1. Ah, good. As you can see, when getting 1, so the current score is back to 0. Here, and now, watch what happens. Good. Nice, that's working. So now the actual current score variable was also set to back to 0, and so 6 plus 0 is 6, okay, for the player 1. Good. So we can of course continue. This one, when you get 1, you see it will come back 0, and I switch to player 1 or player 0. Is this 100? Very look good. Do you see? I have set it to 0, and now I am rolling here. Good. So now the only thing that's left to do is that visualization, okay? So putting that white background here on this other player. So let me show you that in HTML, how it works. So here, what we have, we have this part, this section, okay? So basically the player that is active has this whole section here with the player dash active class, okay? So you see that this first section, which is for player 0 right now, has this class because player 0 is always the first player. But then, as we switch to the other player, we want to remove this class. We want to remove, of course, this class from here and basically put it here on the other player. Okay, so let's do that. And as always, we will start by selecting these two players. Okay, and this time is actually a class. So player 0 class and player 1 class. Okay, so let's do that. So here, sorry, we do it of course here. So const player 0 element. Okay, so document dot query selector. Okay, and now we need of course the dot, because it is the class name. So that's the first one, player --0. And the same thing with player 1. Oops, it is this, and the same thing for player 1. Oh. So it's player 1 dash, and here player 1 element. Good. And now let's actually change their class names. So the player active class, so here of course in the else block. Okay, and for that I will now show you yet another method that's available on the class list property. Well, actually let's start typing player 0 element, okay, dot class list. Nothing new at this part. And we already saw the remove method, so we saw also the add method, but now I will show you the toggle method. So we will use dot toggle. Okay, we'll use this method. And what toggle will do is that if it will add the class if it is not there, and if it is there, it will remove it. Okay, automatically. So we could do that manually also by checking if the class is there and only removing if it is, but using toggle takes that works away from us. So actually we could have used this toggle method in the previous project of the pop-up, but back then I actually want to show you the contains method, remember that. But now again we will use the toggle here because it is easier. And so now we simply have to add this player active class here, okay? Or actually to toggle it. So player dash active. So if we do that on both, then it will work, because on player 0 it will remove the class if it is there, and if it is not, it will add it. And the same thing on the other player. So I will do the same thing for player 1. Like this, copy and paste. And here player 1. Okay? So now, save please. Why don't save? Don't know why. And since we start with the player active class on only one element, so only on player 0 here, okay? Then toggling both at the same time will ensure that it is only ever on one of the elements at once. So let's test our application if the game is well. So let's do that. So let's roll 4, 8. We are waiting 1. Yes, we changed it back as well. And so that works beautiful. You see, great job. And now basically the only thing that's missing to actually make this game work is to hold the current score. And so that is gonna be the topic of the next video, inshallah. So see you for next video to continue our cat game. I hope that you are enjoying with this game and learning at the same time. So take off of us. Please subscribe to my channel Faisal Azib, like this video, share it with your friends, and I'll tell you goodbye. Wassalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.